Carlos Alcaraz crushed Grigor Dimitrov 6-2, 6-3 at Indian Wells to move to 13-0 for the season and extend his record-chasing winning streak. Then he sat down in the press conference room, and within minutes the conversation had nothing to do with the match at all. A journalist asked him about the shot clock, and what came out of his mouth over the next few minutes was one of the most direct, unfiltered things Alcaraz has said in a press conference in a long time. He does not complain often. When he does, it is worth paying attention to. The shot clock has been a source of genuine frustration for Alcaraz across multiple seasons and multiple tournaments, and the incident at the Qatar Open in Doha 2 weeks ago brought it back to the surface in the most visible way yet. In his quarterfinal against Karen Khachanov at 4-4, 40-40 in the opening set, Alcaraz played a punishing rally and finished the point with a delicate drop shot at the net. He hurried to his towel. He was preparing to serve. Chair umpire Maria Citak issued a time violation. Alcaraz stopped and had a prolonged, heated exchange with the official, questioning exactly when the clock had been stopped and arguing that from the moment she said the clock was paused to the moment he was actually ready to serve, there had been no time left at all. The official repeatedly maintained that the timer had been paused only until he reached the towel area. Khachanov himself stepped in and appeared to ask the umpire to rescind the call. Neither request made any difference. The time violation stood. In his post-match press conference after winning the match, Alcaraz was blunt. He called the rule absurd and said the ATP says it wants to attract more people and broaden its audience, but then does not allow players enough time to recover between points to offer the best possible level. He said everything goes too fast and it becomes difficult to engage the crowd. He said umpires should be more flexible, or better yet, a few more seconds should simply be added to the clock. And then he arrived at Indian Wells 4 days later, was asked whether he had spoken to the ATP about changing the rule, and said something that cut even deeper than the Doha press conference. To be honest, nobody came to me to ask me what my opinion is about it. I don't want to waste my time, to be honest, because there have been other situations where you go to complain or to give your opinion, and then nothing changes at all. That is a significant statement from the world number one. He is not just frustrated with the rule itself, or with how individual umpires apply it. He is frustrated with the entire process of raising the complaint through official channels, because his experience of doing exactly that in the past has been that nothing changes. The feedback loop between the players most affected by the rule and the governing body responsible for it is, in his view, broken. And the fact that nobody from the ATP has come to ask his opinion on a rule he has publicly criticized multiple times across multiple seasons is the specific detail that confirms the loop is broken from his perspective. He is the world number one. He has been raising the same complaints since 2024. He then said something at Indian Wells that was sharper than anything from the Doha press conference. He said, "You can see there are different umpires, and that the problem really comes down to one or two of them who have caused issues in many different matches." He said there are other umpires who are flexible about it, and that if you understand tennis, you know how to handle the situation. He then said, the ones who are very strict and have no flexibility are the ones who do not understand tennis at all. That is a direct assessment of specific colleagues from the world number one, delivered in a press conference with full knowledge that it would be reported. He chose to say it anyway. The history behind this frustration is long enough that it cannot be dismissed as a recent reaction to a single incident. The shot clock has been a recurring issue for Alcaraz across multiple seasons and multiple tournaments. And the pattern that emerges when you line up all the incidents in sequence is not a player with a short fuse looking for confrontations with officials. It is a player who competes at a physical intensity that the 25-second rule was simply not designed with in mind, and who has been raising the same specific objection in different stadiums across 2 years without anything changing. The 2024 Miami Open was one of the earlier visible examples. He received a time violation against David Goffin while leading comfortably, and argued that finishing points at the net makes it genuinely difficult to comply with the rule. At the 2024 Queen's Club Championships, during a match against Jaume Munar that lasted over 3 hours, he was issued a violation following a long point, and told the chair umpire directly open he received 2 time violations in the first set alone against Giovanni Impecci Pericard, which prompted a visible reaction from the crowd and a prolonged exchange with the official. At the 2025 Japan Open final against Taylor Fritz in Tokyo, after an exhausting exchange that left him visibly winded, he confronted umpire Fergus Murphy at a changeover and asked him whether he thought it was normal to finish a long point at the net and then barely have time to get to the balls with no time to rest. He told Murphy directly that he had never played tennis in his life. Murphy did not respond. Alcaraz won the title. The frustration remained unresolved. The Doha incident with Cicak brought the whole story back to the surface in the most public way because it happened in a tournament Alcaraz won, which meant the press conferences were large and well attended, and the questions were asked with full context of the previous incidents. The specific detail that caught most attention was the moment Alcaraz asked Cicak to explain precisely when the clock had been stopped, and she told him it was paused only until he reached the towel area. He responded that from that moment to the moment he was ready to serve, there had been no time left at all. Khachanov stepped in to support him. The violation stood. The post-match press conference was where he called the rule absurd and said the ATP was working against its own stated goals of growing the sport's audience by enforcing it too rigidly. What makes the shot clock debate specifically interesting in the context of Alcaraz is the original reason the rule was introduced. The 25-second shot clock was brought in primarily to address the pace of play issues created by Rafael Nadal, and to a lesser extent, Djokovic, both of whom were well-documented slow starters of the shot clock in their prime. Nadal's between-point routine, which included toweling down, adjusting his shirt, his shorts, bouncing the ball a specific number of times before serving, was one of the most recognizable and most criticized elements of his game from opponents who felt it disrupted their rhythm. The shot clock was the ATP's solution to that specific problem. The irony is that the 2 players it was designed to manage are largely absent from the tour now, and the player it is currently frustrating most is Carlos Alcaraz, a man who moves so explosively and competes with such physical intensity that the 25-second window genuinely does not provide him with enough recovery time after the most demanding points he plays. Taylor Fritz, who has been on the opposite side of Alcaraz in a Japan Open final during which the shot clock caused an incident between Alcaraz and Murphy, addressed the same topic at Indian Wells this week. He said he has experienced situations where the 25-second limit feels insufficient after physically demanding points, and that there should be more room for umpires to use their judgment in those specific circumstances, rather than applying the rule mechanically regardless of what the previous point required from both players physically. His alignment with Alcaraz on the issue matters because Fritz is not someone who plays with the same explosive physical intensity, who is involved in the same volume of extended baseline exchanges, or who finishes points at the net with the same frequency that Alcaraz does. If someone who does not share Alcaraz's specific playing style is expressing the same frustration, it suggests the complaint reflects a genuine structural problem in how the rule operates, rather than a single player's idiosyncratic response to being caught out by the clock. Kim Clijsters, the 4-time Grand Slam champion, publicly supported Alcaraz after the Doha incident. She said she loved that he was speaking up, because for him to do it, it must genuinely be triggering and come from a place where he is very annoyed. She said umpires need to read the room, and she referenced an incident during the Australian Open semi-final between Djokovic and Sinner, where a warning was issued in the final stages of a tense match, saying those extra seconds do not meaningfully affect the result, and that spectators watching want to see the players given their moment to recover. She said she thought the ATP might change something about the shot clock behind the scenes as a result of how many incidents had now occurred. Andrea Petkovic offered a more cautionary note. She warned Alcaraz specifically not to engage with Cicak in arguments, saying she will destroy you mentally and emotionally if you get into a confrontation with her. That comment from a former professional who understands on-court psychology is worth holding alongside Alcaraz's Indian Wells statement about not wanting to waste his time. It suggests part of the press conference answer was not just frustration with the ATP's non-responsiveness, but also a pragmatic decision to stop fighting a battle he cannot win mid-match. The broader argument Alcaraz has been making across all of these incidents is actually a coherent one when you strip away the temperature of the moments in which he has made it. He is not arguing that the shot clock should be abolished or that players should be able to take as long as they want between points. His specific argument is that the rule as currently applied does not account for the physical reality of individual points, and that umpires who enforce it rigidly immediately after a 30-shot rally that left both players gasping are misunderstanding what the rule was designed to achieve. It was designed to prevent deliberate time wasting between points. A player who just sprinted from the baseline to the net to finish an exhausting exchange is not time wasting. The distinction between those two situations is, in his view, something that any official who genuinely understands the sport should be able to recognize and respond to with appropriate flexibility. What his Indian Wells press conference added to the ongoing debate was the specific and revealing detail that the institutional channel for raising this complaint feels pointless to him. Nobody has asked his opinion. When he has offered it anyway, nothing has changed. He is the world number one, the most important player on the tour from a commercial and competitive standpoint. And his experience is that the feedback process between players and the governing body on this specific issue is a formality, rather than a genuine mechanism for change. That is the more serious underlying complaint, and it goes further than any individual umpire or any individual incident. You go to complain or to give your opinion, and nothing changes at all. From the player sitting at the top of the sport, that is a statement worth taking seriously. The shot clock debate also arrived at Indian Wells with a specific recent reference point that had nothing to do with Alcaraz, but that added another layer to why the conversation was already running before his press conference. At the Mexican Open in Acapulco, 2 weeks before Indian Wells, Terence Atmain, the young French player who has been making waves on the tour this season, was hit with a point penalty as a returner in a quarterfinal against Miomir Kekmanovic. Kekmanovic was serving with a match point. Atmain, who was unwell and moving slowly between points, was not ready to return in time. The point penalty on a match point ended the contest. The incident generated significant discussion about whether the rule was being applied with appropriate judgment in that specific situation, and Alcaraz's comments in his Indian Wells press conference arrived in the wake of that conversation. He is not the only one raising the question. He is simply the loudest voice at the top of the sport. Whether the ATP acts is a different question. Alcaraz has already decided he is not going to spend his energy finding out. He said he wants to focus on other things. He has a winning streak to extend, a record to chase, and a title at Indian Wells to defend for the third consecutive year. The shot clock will still be there. The umpires will still be there. And the next time a 30-shot rally ends with Alcaraz gasping for air at the net, the 25-second clock will start running regardless of what was said in any press conference. His frustration with that reality is honest. His argument is coherent. And the fact that nobody from the ATP has picked up the phone to ask for his perspective on a rule he has been criticizing for 2 years is, on its own, a fairly telling piece of information about how the relationship between the tour and its players currently functions on this particular issue. Drop your take in the comments on whether you think the ATP should change the shot clock rule. I want to see where people stand on this one. There is also an entertainment argument that Alcaraz has made consistently, and that deserves more consideration than it has received in the wider conversation about the rule. He told Spanish media in Doha that the ATP wants to attract more people and broaden its audience, and then in the same breath prevents players from recovering adequately between the most intense points of the match. His logic is direct. A player who is rushed into serving before they have recovered from a grueling exchange is more likely to produce a short, low-quality point on the next rally, which is worse for the spectator than the extra 2 or 3 seconds of recovery would have been. The ATP's stated commercial goals and the way the shot clock is applied by its strictest officials are, in his view, in direct conflict with each other. He has said this in press conferences, in mid-match exchanges with officials, and now in a major press conference at one of the biggest tournaments of the year. The consistency with which he returns to the same argument across 18 months and multiple incidents is itself evidence that this is not an emotional reaction, but a considered position he has thought about carefully. The original purpose of the rule also matters in this context. The shot clock was introduced primarily to address the pace of play issues associated with Rafael Nadal and, to a lesser extent, Djokovic in their prime. Nadal's between-point routine was one of the most criticized elements of his game by opponents who felt it disrupted their rhythm. The clock was the ATP's response to that specific problem. Both of those players are now largely absent from the regular tour. The players the rule most directly affects now are Alcaraz and Sinner, both of whom play at a pace that would have made Nadal's pre-serve routine look leisurely by comparison. There is a reasonable argument that a rule designed for one era of the sport is being applied without adjustment in a fundamentally different one, and that the players most affected by that gap deserve to have their perspective heard by the people running the tour. Alcaraz knows this. He said nobody came to ask his opinion. That is the problem in its simplest form. Drop your take in the comments on whether you think the ATP should change the shot clock rule. I want to see where people stand on this one. The Indian Wells press conference answer will not be the last time this subject comes up. Alcaraz is still in the tournament. He has matches to play, long rallies to run, points to finish at the net. The clock will keep running. And somewhere in the draws ahead, perhaps in a tight third set, on a warm California evening, the same scenario will play out again. The official will issue the warning. Alcaraz will object. The violation will stand. The only question is whether the ATP, at some point between now and then, decides that the world number one repeatedly saying the same thing in press conference after press conference about a rule that was introduced before most of the current top 10 were competing professionally is information worth acting on.